All right, so I have a question here from a trainer about soreness in their client, and their question is basically, client it we'll call MC. She's really starting to worry that she's not getting sore enough, and I don't really understand either. We bust her butt in the gym, and she has RPs of 9 to 9.5 range for all of her work sets, and we hit many sets to failure with drop sets, and she's only really ever been a little sore. There has nothing like there has been nothing like there should be for someone that has never actually lifted a weight. So she's a newer trainee and is not really experiencing a lot of some soreness here. Do you have any ideas on why this might be happening? Thank you in advance for any insight you could give. Well, there's a lot of things to consider first on this, but first I gotta say that the concept of soreness, you make a good point in that she's a newer trainee and that you would expect more soreness in someone like that, and that's something that we even seek at first in early training to kind of find that person's their threshold for training and what amount of stimulus is going to kind of reach their capabilities and abilities early on. So when we know and we've kind of found that point, and then when the training is appropriate or we have enough volume on. But one thing I should say, big picture wise here, is that soreness ultimately is irrelevant for progress and success. It's just another physiological indicator, like many things that we may feel and experience, and it's not necessary or mandatory for success. And I got to make sure that it's clear first. Now, the more consistent you train and the more you master a certain movement pattern or a rep scheme, you name it, that's just actually a sign when you're not sore that you're actually in better shape and you're conditioned for that style of training, and you're appropriately acclimated and adapted to that training. So that is not exactly this case, but it's an important point to consider that for everyone out there on this, from client to trainer, is that soreness is not mandatory or necessary for progress, and whether that be strength training, hypertrophy, you name it, it's not exactly relevant. And especially in the case of an athlete, too much soreness can be deleterious to your ability to train and do your sport performance. So you don't want to be pushing too much soreness there. But more specifically to this case here, there's a few things I would look at. And first being that since this is someone new, you got to look at any kind of imbalances that may be there that are inhibiting certain muscle groups from firing, any neurological problems that could be going on in terms of not being able to contract or engage the muscle group appropriately. So first thing I would do, thinking through this in the most simple to more advanced and complicated spectrum of this, I would work on palpating the muscle group that you're focusing on. So yes, we should experience some soreness with this client as she is a newer client, and we need to work in dialing, getting that mind-muscle connection kind of focused in at first so she can properly engage that, and then perhaps you might experience that. But first I would palpate the muscle of focus. So let's say it's a tricep muscle, pushing in, digging into that muscle belly, kind of digging in with your fingers a little bit. You can vibrate, oscillate into the muscle there, kind of dig it and get it to fire and contract more. You can poke it, pry it, things of that nature. But basically you're going to palpate it to get to contract and fire a little bit more aggressively. So they can feel a tactile stimulus there mentally, and they can feel more of a mind-muscle connection there, but also they should be acting on the nervous system there to get that muscle group to fire, and she can feel a muscle group that's actually supposed to be firing. So that would be the first thing I would think of to really get that coordination and that neural groove sort of set up with that muscle there first. So if that's not doing it, then you mentioned that you're doing drop sets failure sets and drop sets. Now she could simply be like I said, she's not engaging the correct muscle groups as possible, and she's actually compensating with the surrounding muscle groups, and they could be over-dominating the work. Now, where imbalances might occur is that she may be over-dominant on a certain muscle group. Let's say, for example, she's doing a bench press, and she's shoulder and tricep dominant, and she might have, say, anteriorly rotated shoulders. Well, she'll be doing most of that pressing motion with, say, triceps and shoulders, and the chest never really gets activated because it's kind of inhibited by its length-tension relationship with the shoulders and tricep. So getting better posture there, getting the chest to open up a bit with various stretches, could be the doorway stretches, arms abducted out to the side at 90 degrees, one arm grab and turn away to open up the pec minor and chest there. Getting more that chest to open up and maybe even strengthening up the backside, rolling out between the shoulder blades and then strengthening retraction there to get the chest to open up. So you can get more recruitment of the chest muscle fibers, and down in that bottom range of motion, you're getting more of a stretch into the chest to get that to engage a bit more. So think of that in terms of any joint or muscle group that you're really working on is making sure that muscle is not it's not inhibited from the improper length tension relationship, and other muscle groups are not over dominating it. When on a bench press and that some of those ranges there, especially in the bottom, it should be more of a chest-based exercise, and then through the final range of that motion, more of a tricep exercise. So think of that as you're going through this. So whatever the muscle group you're targeting, whatever may not seem to be getting sore. So first palpation, then looking at the appropriate length tension relationship and muscle balance to that muscle and its antagonist group, plus the synergistic muscles around it. So that's where that inhibition occurs, is if the synergistic muscles are over dominating, or if the inhibitory muscle, the back muscles are that need stretching. So if you actually stretch the antagonist muscle group, that's the antagonist muscle group that can actually help to better stimulate the agonist muscle group. So that's the next thing I look at. So between sets, to actually get the muscle to wake up more muscle fibers, to recruit more muscle fibers, you can do two different forms of stretching. And a lot of times we do different corrective stretches between sets in terms of whatever, let's say it's the pec minor, whatever the postural flaw may be. But first, let's think of in terms of the agonist or the active muscle group you want to feel. So if you stretch that, let's say we're talking about chest still, if you stretch the chest muscle between sets, you can actually lengthen it out and get more recruitment of more muscle tissue and more muscle fibers there within the chest. So that would be a very quick and easy way to do that. So you could actually do two parts, palpating during the set and then stretching the active muscle group between sets, and that should really bring in more muscle tissue and some really good soreness after that workout. So that's one thing. And then, like I said, also it could be the corrective type of stretching or stretching the antagonist group between sets as well, which will serve to inhibit less. So if the back muscles are tight for the chest, that can actually inhibit how well the chest would fire, and that's the basically physiological response of how that works. So try both sides of the coin there. I would start first with stretching the agonist muscle and then see how the antagonist muscle works. Perhaps then hit both if you've got the time for it. Now those are the most basic things I would consider first to really consider why this newer trainee may not be getting soreness. Then you got to look at the rep types, the muscle fiber types and things like that, tempo and rep speed that really is going to make a difference there. So first I would say eccentric based reps are going to cause the most soreness. So the lowering portion of the lift, where on the bench press again, since we keep going there, it would be the lowering portion of the reps. So making sure you're not going too fast there. Part of drop sets and going to failure and things like that is the tempo can get too quick, and you start to rush through various phases of the rep, and you just use momentum, and so, if you do have synergistic muscles that can override the prime mover there that you're trying to make sore, that can distort that whole process. So lowering slow and controlled and tight, make sure you're coordinated and dialed into that correct muscle. Could be a 4-second negative, could be an 8-second negative, but usually those eccentrics are really what's causing that muscle damage and that delayed onset muscle syndrome, where the soreness is really going to live. So that's where you're lengthening the muscle, and it's actually going to cause more micro tears within the muscle itself, which will cause that soreness and feeling of actual work. So that's one legitimate physiological response to soreness that is creating more muscular change and is very strongly correlated to hypertrophy as well. So that would be step 2 there. Then considering what her muscle fiber type makeup might be, she could be more fast twitch, more slow twitch, more of a blend between the two, but you really got to explore all elements of that. If you've been doing the same rep scheme primarily the whole time with this client, let's say you're doing a scheme where it's 12 to 15, 10 to 12, 8 to failure, well, you're all in that 8 to 15 kind of rep scheme range, which would be more light style of training, and she may just be fatigued to the point where she can't actually recruit the higher threshold motor units or muscle fiber types that are the faster twitch, the bigger muscle groups that we have. So in order to engage more quality muscle tissue, getting into the higher rep schemes the lower rep schemes with heavier loads. But at the same time, after engaging those rep schemes, then backing off with some of the lighter loads with perhaps greater loads. So it's a rep scheme I like a lot, which would be the 5, 10, 15, where you hit the max set of 5, back off to about 85% for 10, and then back off to about 70% for 15 to failure. That would be one example of getting a blend of muscle fiber types within that workout. And you might find where she may have a sweet spot or may do better in terms of activating and engaging, and she may just be, like I said, inhibited from fatigue and not really able to properly engage and contract the muscle as strongly as possible because she's fatigued and lactates built up and her nervous system's not able to get as high quality of a contraction. So perhaps ramping up and focusing on some strength and power combined with some hypertrophy and endurance type sets there. But then once you kind of take out the slack and the fat of what her true strength potential is, and getting more muscle recruitment there, those drop sets and those pauses, the drop sets at least like you said, and the failure sets that you said might be more productive. So think of that as a concept of post-tetanic facilitation. So working up to high weight where fatigue is not a limiting factor, then backing off with greater loads for higher rep sets than what you normally might be capable of. So that should definitely cause some soreness as well, if that would be the limiting factor in terms of not being able to recruit as strongly. Then from there, more advanced, I would say, scenarios on this would be simply that the muscle group has not really found its capacity. I mean, you have not really done the amount of volume and tonnage or density of work for that muscle group to actually get any soreness to occur. But I would doubt that in her case, since she's a newer trainee. But if she's had some previous training going into this, that may be the case. But ruling out all these other issues we talked about, that would be my next thing to look at. Perhaps this person just got a very high work capacity, and you need to get a higher volume of work in there, some compound movements, some isolation movements, and really finding where her work tolerance might be. And maybe she's an extreme individual that has just got that high work capacity. But I must say that I've definitely gone that route too premature in the past. Whereas when I found that there was a postural flaw or an imbalance somewhere, really inhibiting the muscle group that I'm after, which was really the root cause. So beating something to death without properly activating is the wrong way to go first, when you need to find out how to activate that muscle group first and work out any balance that might occur there. So think of that in the right perspective. Then let's say it's the advanced trainee still, and the volume is the actual solution there. Then you got to start looking at more hybrid techniques where it could be pre-exhaustion of that muscle group, where you might hit a small single joint isolation type exercise for that muscle, followed by a compound movement. So you're activating sort of like that stretching concept we talked about earlier, but a compound move might be a dumbbell chest fly to press, where you have dumbbells and you're working a chest fly exercise, and then you go right into dumbbell bench press. You're basically taking a loaded eccentric, so you're getting the stretching phenomenon going on there with a slow eccentric there and getting more muscle damage, recruiting more muscle tissue, and then doing more of a compound movement where you can actually hit more reps out to failure, taking that muscle to a little bit higher workload and capacity than what you normally might be able to do. That's just one small example. And another thing to consider on dumbbells as another variation is that you can actually get a greater range of motion, more stretch on the muscle, so that might increase more soreness as well. So that would be a pre-exhaustion technique or a hybrid technique. You could do other things like, if it was for the lats, doing dumbbell pullovers to pull downs or pull-ups. So again, you've got a eccentric or stretch-based exercise there, followed by a concentric or compound type movement to follow thereafter. But again, that's more of an advanced technique and path to go down. So look at that as a kind of a compound set where you hit one exercise to the next, or you could even do giant sets where it could be something as extreme. Let's say it's the quads, where you go leg extensions to back squats to walking lunges, all in one giant set. And that would be extreme ninja territory, where someone just has a high work capacity. I have had clients like that where we'd have to just blitz and pump up blood into their quadriceps first. And once we get a nice big blood volume there, the muscle is kind of compressed and cramped in there very tight. And then from there, doing a compound movement like the squats, getting more motor units and muscle activation going on with a heavier compound movement. And then finally with something a little less taxing, but still a little bit more isolated, like a single leg exercise, or getting back to more of a single joint kind of movement. And you could flip that order around. It could go lunges, squats, leg extensions, something like that. So that'd be another version of that. So basically going through that hierarchy, kind of go through that checklist of most simple to most advanced, and kind of think of and respect where this client really is. If all else fails there, then you got to look at more advanced techniques or something, or some complementary therapy. Could be everything from acupuncture to chiropractic adjustments, things of that nature, to really help see whatever imbalances or postural flaws or mechanics might be there. So try that out and see how it works.